All right, everyone. So if you want to know about a big game this weekend, the Broncos and Chargers is that. Okay. This is a game for the first time in quite some years, right? There is going to be a chance for the one of these teams to win this division, right? Because the Chiefs are now 0-2, the Chargers are 2-0, and the Broncos are 1-1, but very easily could be 2-0, right? Very easily could be 2-0 if not for a penalty. So this division is up for grabs, and the Raiders are hanging out there at 1-1 as well. But this game could go two ways. In the first way, right, you have the Chargers win this thing, and then they're 3-0 in the division, and that's a decently commanding lead because you're going to have some tiebreakers over the Chiefs, and you're gonna have a tiebreaker. Actually, if they beat the Broncos, they'll have a tiebreaker over everybody in the division up until this point, with only one game against each remaining. If the Broncos win this thing, you now have the tiebreaker over the Chargers, and due to that, you'll be 2-1, right? So I think they'll actually be the number one team in the division at that point, right? Yeah, I don't know how the tiebreaker would work out if the Raiders ended up winning, but the point is that the winner of this will put themselves at the top of this division. So as we always do, we're going to break this thing down, and I'm going to, give you why I think both teams can cover. So the Broncos plus 2.5. The total for the game is 45.5. On the money line, the Broncos are plus 120, and they're on the road. So here's the notes I took for the Broncos. Look, this would be a big one, and I think when you look at all the momentum, and sometimes in betting, you're trying to find, okay, what team is being overvalued here, and there's a chance where the Chargers they have their first snooze fest of the year in this game. The Broncos come out of nowhere and they figure this thing out. And this would be a major win. And I think Sean Payton's going to have them playing about as good as they can, coming off a loss. And that really is a big impact in football, right? The Chargers are about as good as we've seen them. Herbert's playing about as good as we've seen him. The Broncos just have to be devastated by that loss they had to the Colts. You kind of put all of that together, and I think there's a recipe here for a little bit of an upset. And 2.5 is now becoming a better number, than I would say in past years. In past years, really 2.5 is like a kind of a disaster number, right? You want 3.5 or three. 2.5 is starting to matter a little bit more. In fact, it mattered until the Colts made that field goal. I had Colts last week plus 2.5, so I was fine either way. Think about it. If you had 1.5, you lose that game. So I think 2.5 is a key number if we're betting the spread. On the flip side of this, the Chargers to me, number one, they've looked elite, and it starts with Justin Herbert. That defense looks like it's playing well, but Justin Herbert, if he can continue the trend he's on, well, this Chargers team is going to be good, and they're going to be tough, right? And I think in that sense, there's really not too many holes you could poke in this Chargers team at this point. On the flip side of that, I haven't seen the Broncos play that complete game. Even week one, I mean, it just wasn't pretty. Week two, it just wasn't pretty. The Chargers, we've seen some decent football, right, against the Chiefs, and then of course against the Raiders. And so, if I'm looking at just basing it off of the two performances we've seen from both teams, the Chargers win that going away. They beat the Chiefs, and they go ahead and take out a division opponent as well on the road. So this is just one of those things where I think if we're trying to decide what we're betting here, the Chargers on paper, what they've done so far this season, I think have the Broncos beat going away. And I don't know if that was the case coming into the year, right? Especially because we just don't know. Bo Nix shows us signs of greatness and then signs of, just not being a very, very good quarterback. So what am I going to bet now that we've gone through both teams? Well, I'm going to be on the Chargers. And I want to be clear, this is a game that at, 5:30, I'm going, man, the Broncos did it. They figured it out. This was an obvious Broncos spot. It was too obvious that the Chargers were the play here. And, sometimes that leads you to betting the other team. But I just can't overlook what I've seen from the Broncos and what I've seen from the Chargers. When you look at the Chargers, what are they doing? Their offense is finding a rhythm. They look like they're having fun. I saw Keenan Allen catch a touchdown pass against the Raiders. You see him doing his dance moves, and I think the announcer said something of, Keenan Allen back in a Chargers uniform, right? It feels like it's really on the offensive end, they are just loving life, right? And they are enjoying playing the game of football. And when you get a quarterback and his receivers, when they're enjoying it like that, it's tough to beat. On the flip side, that defense is mean. Okay. That defense plays hard, they play tough. And simply put, the Broncos, I just don't have a ton of faith that they're going to be able to deal with that defense. We haven't seen Bo Nix put together that clean game. And if you're going to give Justin Herbert and the Chargers all these opportunities, it doesn't matter how good the Broncos defense may or may not be, because you're giving the Chargers, a really good offensive team, extra possessions. And so if that's the case, I really think that we could see a world in which, the Chargers kind of win this one. And it makes that loss last week from the Broncos even more devastating for them, because if the Broncos had won last week, it's not that this loss wouldn't matter, but it wouldn't be the end of the world. But if they lose this thing and fall to 1-2, you're going to have to make up some ground, and I think that's going to be pretty disappointing for them. But I just can't right now on the road. I just can't trust that Broncos team. We just haven't quite seen it yet. So thank you all for watching. As we always say, never gamble what you can't afford to lose. And, there's no profit guaranteed from this pick. I'm just giving my thoughts on the game, and we will see you next time.